Let's talk a little bit about Jung. The fact is that he was not only a psychologist, but also an occultist, and he became an occultist much earlier, having organized a spiritualist circle in his youth. He also studied astrology and alchemy. He heard voices inside himself and talked to them. For example, a certain woman lived in it, who, according to him, intruded into his thoughts. This led to the appearance of the archetype of the anima, that is, the feminine principle in the male psyche, which he attributed, extended to all men. Jung also saw a vision, fell into the underworld, as he called it, in which something similar to magical initiations happened to him. He communicated with characters that no one else had seen. For example, one of Jung's mentors was a certain Philemon, a creature in the form of an old man with horns and wings. At times, Jung wrote, he was completely real. I was walking with him in the garden, and he was something like what they call a guru in India. Philemon communicated with Jung on psychological topics, and Jung, based on the information received from him, voiced it in the form of innovative approaches to psychology. Therefore, by the way, when psychologists voice Jung's ideas and use his terminology, they partly voice what Philemon told him. Another mentor of Jung was a certain K. He appeared to him for the first time, climbing out of the earth's crevice. And in his face, according to Jung, there was something demonic or Mephistophelic, introducing the concept of synchronicity. Jung wanted to substantiate the existence of paranormal phenomena that surrounded his family. They had a poltergeist at home, and, according to Jung's recollections, his daughter's blanket disappeared twice during the night, and the house was filled with ghosts. Also, his daughter and mother were contacts with spirits, as, indeed, Jung himself. In general, it should be noted that a number of Jung's ideas, such as collective unconscious, archetypes, synchronicity, do not have a scientific character. Professor Richard Newell, author of the book The Secret Life of Carl Jung, believes that the psychological mask was created by Jung deliberately, and partly falsely, in order to make his own magical polytheistic and pagan worldview more attractive to the secularized world, which tends to recognize only those ideas that seem to have a scientific tinge. In other words, Jung is not a psychologist who sometimes dabbled in the occult, but an occultist, a pagan, and a preacher of polygamy, who wrapped these ideas in a psychological wrapper to give them greater credibility. And he directly prescribed as a medical remedy for married men who were his patients to have mistresses in order, as Jung believed, to release instinctive creative energy. And he certainly did not deny himself the release of this energy by having affairs with patients. And when his wife gave birth to 5 children, he informed her, that is, he simply confronted her with the fact that they were starting a free relationship with you. And he had a schedule when and with whom he communicates, and on weekends, for example, one of his mistresses could come and spend time with him and his family. Perhaps someone will say that this is a high relationship, but as for me, it's just an abomination. And Jung behaved towards his wife just like a pig. And not just like a pig, he brought a supposedly scientific basis for this. You can imagine how he explained to her about the collective unconscious and archetypes. And not only that, he launched this teaching to the masses. The next one we can still meet in modern medicine. Echoes, so to speak. The fact is that Jung believed that in order to achieve physical and mental health, as well as for people to reach a new level of being, it is necessary to get rid of socio-ethical norms, as well as to break family, social, and religious shackles. We have already met a similar approach, as you remember, in synastic astrology with its so-called cosmic ethics. And, by the way, in exactly the same way, that is, summing up the scientific base, Jung justified Nazism. For example, he wrote that the Aryan unconscious has a higher potential compared to the Jewish one. And he called Hitler a visionary, a spiritual vessel, the first person to explain to every German what he thinks and what he feels in his unconscious mind about the fate of Germany. He also believed that Hitler drew his extraordinary energy from the Teutonic unconscious. As they say, you can't dig in, everything is strictly scientific. Of course, then Jung justified himself, blaming it on the demands of the time. Now Jung has many admirers who call him a genius, but this situation reminds me of Malevich's Black Square, when everyone praises, and those who express doubts immediately sign up as Lopotnik men who do not understand anything about art. Of course, I will say right away that I am not a specialist, and therefore, I do not undertake to make judgments about the influence of Jung's work on modern science, but nevertheless, it seems to me that his personality and ideas are greatly overestimated and somewhat discredit psychology as a science. And, by the way, do you know the name of the foundation that publishes unpublished works by Jung? The Philemon Foundation. The fact is that Jung has many unpublished works. This foundation plans to publish up to 30 volumes, since relatives who keep his essay and correspondence are in no hurry to share it with the public, referring to the fact that these writings will allegedly be misunderstood. But in fact, it seems to me, because after their publication, Jung will appear in a completely different light. Many famous astrologers subsequently relied on Jung's idea. He also believed that he was initiated into a mystical brotherhood with Julian the Apostate, and considered Christianity his personal enemy. Just as eyewitnesses recall, he could not pronounce the word church without swearing. One of Jung's followers recalled that when she wanted to convert to Catholicism, he wrote to her the following: "There is no place next to me for those who are in the bosom of the church. Your confessor is here, not there," that is, he is talking about himself. "I serve for those people who are outside the church." And when Neela Jaffe wrote a biography of Jung, she refused to include this letter there. Curious, isn't it? In other words, Jung's biography is quite heavily combed. According to the memoirs of those who knew him for many years, Jung himself behaved as if his psychology was another religion. He believed that good and evil are just concepts, and that a person can afford not to do good, but to do evil, if this is his ethical choice. He also believed that it was necessary to revise the dogma of the Holy Trinity, and include Satan there. In general, this topic is quite interesting, and requires more detailed research, but now let's go back to astrology again. As we remember, a horoscope can endow a person with the most negative moral qualities. What do some astrologers suggest a person to do with this?